So today's questions and answers for the virtual stadium is with myself. I'm Mel Purkiss. I am the new Athlete Wellbeing and Engagement Manager for Athletics Australia. And we are lucky to be joined by Tamsyn Manou, who as obviously most of you already know, and as a champion 800 meter runner, multiple national champion. How many nationals, T?
18. I think maybe says that I ran for a very long time. I ran for a long time because I absolutely loved it. And Mel, can I say it is so nice to have you working for Athletics Australia, because I actually brought something for you to show you, because I saw the picture that they put up on Instagram where you were in front of me in that relay 2002 Commonwealth Games. So I just wanted to show you something that I've managed to
What is that, T? What?
This is the Commonwealth Games gold medal. Can you see it? Can you see it?
Yes. I knew you were going to do that. Luckily, last time I went back to the UK, I brought it back with me, and yes, here is my silver medal. I'm very proud of my silver medal, but clearly I was very proud that I was ahead of you for a little bit in that race. So yes,
we had a great time. Like Australia and England in 2002, obviously we were both on the first and second in that on the podium, and you and I both ran the third leg. And look at this, like how many years later, 18 years later, and now you moved to Australia, and I think 2008 to train with our group, and now you're working for Athletics Australia. So I think that's brilliant, and you are the best person for the job for sure.
Oh, thank you, Tamsyn. I can't express how excited I am about being in this role. So for those of you that don't know me, I am an ex-400 runner, a former 400 runner for England, but I came out here 11 years ago and started training with Tamsyn. Done some of the nationals, the athletics scene. Used to run for local clubs, same club as Tamsyn, so we got to run in the same relay teams together, and then also did a bit of the pro circuit as well. So I do, and obviously Melbourne is my home now, and athletics is my passion. So I'm just so stoked to be here. Tamsyn, you know that my background has been in sports psychology and psychology, and recently been working in mental health for Headspace at the Child and Youth Mental Health Organisation. And just so lucky, I feel so fortunate to be working for Athletics Australia now in this role. And I might explain a little bit more about what athlete wellbeing and engagement is. There are 5 pillars of support, one being mental health, another being engagement, another being career and education. And we've also got personal development and conduct and professionalism. And basically, it's just like a wraparound of support for life outside of sport. And I don't know about you, T, but you know, organizations and programs like this weren't around when we were athletes. And you know, what would you have done, like how would this have changed for you as an athlete if you had something you know, of this era and like this to support you?
I think for me, they've always had little programs around the place that they've tried to look after the athlete wellbeing sort of side of things, but the problem has always been the person who's in the role then connecting with the athlete. Every athlete, you know, because you've come from the background of track and field, you know how broad our sport is, and you know the different characters that are involved in our sport. And a lot of people don't like to ask for help, or they don't actually read the things to know that there is avenues for help. So I think for me, I was probably one of those people who didn't desperately need a lot of those pillars that you mentioned, but there was a couple through my career that I would have loved to know that I could tap into. Yeah. And I guess knowing that you're in this role and being completely biased, because I know how I've known you for so long, I know that we claim you as an honorary Australian because you married an Australian and you lived here for over 12 years. And because you do have even when you competed, you were such a different sort of athlete. You definitely genuinely cared about what was going on around you, and you could see what was happening with other athletes as well, in terms of a lot of athletes are sort of in that tunnel of not being as aware as you were. So in this position, for somebody like me who didn't have those 5 pillars and have that ability to tap into, how do the athletes know how to get in contact with you and know that they actually may have a weakness in some of those pillars that they do need to reach out and ask for help from you?
Yeah, well, doing things like this, because obviously I would normally be face to face and hopefully, traveling around and meeting a lot of the NAS funded athletes and going to the institutes and meeting people. But at the moment, I've been doing some virtual catch ups with people. But you can contact me through the Athletics Australia and the main numbers. I'm so lucky to be working here. I actually started working about 5-6 weeks ago, so the day of the Olympic postponement. What a day and time to start, hey? From home.
From home. But too, so you are really being thrown into it.
Yeah. It's been great to engage with people, and it's really important, like you said, that people know that this program exists and that support is available. It's really far-reaching as well, so it's not just for the athletes, it is for the coaches. So there's a lot of coach education and support that goes out through my role, and really athlete wellbeing and coach wellbeing is really high on Athletics Australia's agenda, and in terms of priority, it's right in the frame. Obviously, with the circumstances that have been going on, it's been really heartwarming to hear like how central and how much care and support is there for athletes at the moment. So yeah, I would just ask people to reach out. My details will be able to be on Athletics Australia and also on the AIS website, because the AIS actually fund or have been supporting and funding the athlete wellbeing and engagement positions, which have been going out across all the sports. So there's lots of great information and resources which are available for people. So yeah, hopefully watch this space.
And on that one, Mel, I do know when I was an athlete a long time ago, a lot of the times when there were connections where you would just tap into the resources, a lot of athletes don't like doing that unless they have a real connection with a one-on-one person. So I think with you being the face for this for the athletes, and the athletes knowing that you were an elite athlete in the past, that actually makes it probably a lot more helpful for athletes being willing to actually, ask for some help, because I do know that one-on-one connection, the communication is so super important for athletes.
Yeah, and I think it's a really big step. Like you said, like you had an amazing career internationally. You had years as well, and you were so robust and injury. Like you didn't have that many injuries as an athlete, and just the levels that you could sustain were awesome. But some people's careers aren't quite like that, and you have to kind of take the rough with the smooth. And when you hit a bit of a tricky period in terms of like study or not knowing what to do in terms of where next with your life, I can be there to support, to say, oh, it might be this way or that way, and also to support within the institute. So a lot of athletes are already established within their national institutes, which is great. And there's loads of resources that I can point people to within their institutes, and to have a friendly face there as well. But I'm here and happy to be able to pick up the phone and support people. And as I said, there's just so much information out there at the moment. So it's awesome.
Okay, so before we get into the questions and answers, I just want to ask one quick thing. What about the athletes who have fallen through the cracks that aren't in institutes that will need help? Can they still approach you?
Yeah, I'm happy for people to approach. I think that the level of support is still there in terms of information. So if people say, like coaches or athletes are saying, we want some information about goal setting, I'm trying to put that up onto the website at the moment. You might have seen AA's website has got a virtual stadium, and under there's a healthy minds section, and we're trying to put these question and answer sessions are in there. So Jonah gave a session a couple of weeks ago, and Jonah Oliver.
Yep.
Joan Oliver is the psychologist.
For anyone listening.
You're so good at what you do, I forget. So Jonah Oliver gave a talk a couple of weeks ago, and there's questions and answer sessions which are all up under the virtual stadium under Healthy Minds. And there are other sections. There's some healthy recipes, and there's other great information which is all being put up there. There's a way that we can engage from a sport perspective, and yeah, loads of great stuff all up on the virtual stadium. So go check it out.
To have a look at. That's available for anyone to have a look at.
Yeah, that's all there. So I'm hoping to use that platform, the Healthy Minds section, to be able to get things out to everybody. So it might be about managing routines around, there's some information up there at the moment in terms of structure and support for goal setting. There's some information about coach wellbeing. So really great resources, really important. And another big focus for my role is around coach wellbeing and supporting coaches. Because as we both know, there's a big burden that they shoulder and wear. And we really want to put the supports there where they're needed. Actually, Mike Barber, Kelsey Lee Barber's coach, the other day put a really great article out around the supports and things that he's put in place to be able to support him and switch off from athletics. So yeah, I'd encourage you to check that out as well.
Fantastic. All right, now hit us with some questions.
And I think that's very focused towards Athletics Australia. And it's such a great question, because this period of time of being COVID and isolation, it's been really hard on everyone. But as well, you had the Olympic postponement announcement. And it's, been a really, really tricky time for people. I must say that, some people have been able to refocus their goals quite quickly and, go, right, okay, the goal is the same, but we've got a little bit longer to try and reach it. And for other people, it's been really hard, a hard, bitter pill to swallow, but been really, really good at putting supports in. And now, hopefully, within the next, well, we don't know about how long, but it looks like, there are some places opening up that people will be able to train again. So I think Western Australia started this week, so which is really good, and going back to the track. But I think in terms of re-engaging athletes to find their motivation, it's really simple, or not simple, but that transition is really important. And I think taking it slow and really, being in touch with what you need to do, listening to your coaches, but taking it slow in terms of a transition. Because I don't know if it's like me, or if you're like me, Tamsyn, but even having 3 or 4 weeks off for training at the end of the season, I just want to go full bore back into it. And we were quite lucky because, being 400-meter runners, you probably go into more endurance, like, aerobic kind of work. But right now, I know people are probably really wanting to, smash the track or the field and, just really go for it. And I think it's about taking it slow and having that transition, but also resetting your goals so that you can keep that motivation high and set small, manageable goals.
Yeah. Well, as an athlete, you do go in ebbs and flows. And so I think that when you are gearing up for a major and the major's getting closer, then your intensity sort of right on. I think if an athlete is out there lacking motivation, that's completely normal. Just relax and go with it. Just, it's you're so far away from the next major championship. You can't have your mind switched on in that elite competition phase the whole time. So you need to take that step back and just try and get the work in. It's the time where you look around at your support network and you make sure that support network is really strong. If you've got the right coach and you've got the right people around you, you just lean on them as hard as you can, because they will look after you and they will help you get motivated when the time is right to gear back up into motivation stakes. And you know what? If you're an elite athlete that's going to be making Olympics, you know how to get motivated when the time's right.
Exactly. And it's that great time to build it. And like you said, to have that dormant phase and to have that fire burning in your belly. But, just to take it slowly right now, because this time next year, it'll be, on, hopefully, and that'll be the time that you'll be cranking up. So even spending that time with loved ones, and if you're normally traveling overseas at this time, appreciating that you can have more time, hopefully, with your family face to face, if not virtually, and really enjoying the things that you can't when you're out competing, training, and in that heavy bit of competition phase.
Well, you and I both will agree on this one, because I know that you studied while you were competing as well. And look, I've probably done all phases. When I was at school, I was full on. I was one of the lucky ones who made teams when they were still at school. So I know what that was like, that commitment. And then I went to uni full time straight after school. Sydney Olympics was on while I was still studying. And then after it, I had to work part-time, but it was tough because I lived over in England. So there was a period of time when I was living in England and didn't have a work visa where I was pretty much just running. I ran my best when I had something else to do. And I find, having spoken to a lot of the other athletes, they're the same. It's obviously a lot more difficult with certain courses that are face-to-face courses. Being a Southern Hemisphere people in a predominantly European summer sport, Northern Hemisphere summer sport, is more difficult because we have our exams in the middle of the year and straight after when the major is, and so you will miss a lot of that hands-on time. But it is doable. It's always doable. I think back when I first started university, I went to my head of the year level that I was at, and I remember them saying to me, "Well, you're going to have to make a choice between uni and sport." And I looked at them thinking, I don't think that's the case. Now, a lot of people probably would have taken that at face value, but I went straight over that person's head to the next person who was in charge, and they loved the fact that they had an Olympian and an Australian representative at the uni, and they bent over backwards to help me. So I guess I would say that I definitely am a firm believer in being able to do both, to parallel learn your scholastic side and work, and also do your athletics at a high level. But I would always say that you make sure that you connect with the right people and get help, because you'll need help to be able to do it. But let's just think about it. To be an elite athlete, there's only a few things you cannot compromise, and that's you've got to eat well, you have to get your sleep and recovery in, and you have to do the training sessions. If you're a certain type of athlete, like we were 400-meter runners, 800-meter runners, distance runners, you can't train all day long. I think the only event where you train all day long would probably be the decathlon and the heptathlon. So if you're not in one of those events, you have a lot of spare time where you can work and do something else to take your mind off athletics. I think they complement each other.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that flexibility is the key, that if you want that, you can make it work. And I think there's so many flexible options around now in terms of the modules that you can do, or if you've got like a time that you're going to be at home and you have more time on your hands, then you can actually study a little bit more. And, there's also elite athlete coordinators, student coordinators, for athletes who are wanting to, maybe take some time off or needing a bit of flexibility within their exams or the structures, and loads of support available for people who are studying. So I agree with you. I think, trying to have that dual support and that dual focus is really good.
And on that, one of your pillars was career and education, wasn't it? So if they are having struggles, they can contact you and find out ways to get around things. Is that right?
Yeah, there's lots of support. There's a career practitioner network with like one-to-one support in terms of career progressions and skill buildings, like lots and lots of support available. So yeah, contact me if you're in that situation, and don't feel like it has to be either or. You can have both. And so important to keep that career in the background, especially post athletics. Athletics doesn't last forever, and you're really done such a great work at transitioning from out of athletics. Actually, well, not out of athletics, because you're still in athletics and always will be, I imagine, hopefully. For us, it's fabulous for us, but that step out of being a full-time athlete and a full-time competitive international athlete, going to the what else is a massive step. And this is what we really want to be able to support people through, that because it looks different for everybody as well.
It does. And I think for the person who asked that question, it's sometimes nice to know that people have walked that path before and succeeded. Like in Australian terms, you can just think of people like a Bronwyn Thompson, say, who was fourth in the Olympics in 2004 in the long jump. She did physio. So she studied physio as well as competed at a very high level. So for the person who asked that question, I think that it's also really good to know that people have walked the path before. They have actually been able to be really successful in their athletic career and be really successful in their careers in the workforce as well. For example, someone like Bronwyn Thompson, who finished fourth at the Olympics in the long jump, amazing athlete. She was studying physio and became a physiotherapist. Overseas, there's someone like a Laura Muir, who's a brilliant 1500 meter runner, still running, and she's now fully qualified vet. So, and that's just two people. There are so many athletes that are just brilliant. You just have to look through the books, and you'll find that most athletes that you're out there watching competing for Australia now are very successful in other things that they do.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think Jen and Steve were talking about it in their questions and answers a couple of weeks ago. And yeah, it's very prominent, and I think it'll be really helpful for athletes watching this to know that you can actually do both. This is so broad. I find mental health is so broad. We're all on a continuum of good health and good mental health, bad mental health, and especially during this time in isolation, there's been some big ups and downs, I think, for most people on an everyday basis. And most of that is very, very normal. And it's all normal to have all those ups and downs and those moods. But specifically for mental support or for mental training, and I'm really keen to hear what you think about this as well, is that I think it's quite an untapped area, in that, sports psychologists are there and psychologists are there. But you know what? Do we find as an athlete, I didn't as an athlete, but do you train your mental side as much as your physical side? Because you'll know, when it comes down to in being in an Olympics or being at the top of your game and the biggest championship that you're going to that year, be it World Championships, Commonwealth Games, Olympics, at that point, what sets you apart from the other person who's been full-time training or doing everything that they can to get their body, the best they can? I feel it's the mind, and strengthening the mind and having those skills and that resilience and that confidence to know that you can push through and be the best that you can be. For me, I think it's an area that everybody should look at and identify their strengths and strengthen their weaknesses as well.
Yep, definitely. Yep. It's one of those things where everyone's so different. It's like your talent level in terms of genetic pool and how you go about your training. Some people are better at certain things than others. Same with the mind. Some people are born with the strongest minds in the world. And I've watched fellow competitors who I cannot get over how mentally tough they are. Like Sally Pearson's one that comes to mind. You just watch her in her eyes when she's standing behind those blocks, get to go over those hurdles. She was amazing every time a major came about. Kathy Freeman's another one. We've had some amazing people who are so super strong in the mind, but then there are other athletes that I know that you could break in a call room and you'd watch them self-implode. Every person is so different, and I 100% agree that you need to train your mind. Bizarrely enough, when I look back on my career, I actually did it naturally without even realizing that I was doing it. You do those, you sit there and you imagine yourself going through the race. You visualize how you'll feel as you walk out into the massive home Olympic stadium with 100,000 people. You try and get yourself into the moment so that you can relax and not be terrified when you walk out there the first time and you experience it, because you feel like you've already done it before. So you actually do it a lot of the times without realizing that you are training your mind as an elite athlete. On the flip side with mental health, I think as an elite athlete, the pressure can become quite immense at times, and having an outlet is really super important. Now, I know yoga is big for a lot of people where they practice their breathing. That wasn't something that I got into when I was an athlete. I really respect that now that I've retired, and I wish that I had have done a bit more of that breathing sort of side of thing and just bringing it back to being calm. But for me, the thing that really helped me was something so simple. It wasn't tapping into any resources. It was walking my dog. If I felt like I was getting really stressed, I would get my dog and I would just go for a walk. And I always found I came back feeling a million times better. athletes will always realize that they're fit. They should be able to tap into a feeling and know when the pressure's getting too much for them. And I can't recommend enough having an outlet that works for them. There is one thing that would have been really hard for me as an athlete these days, and I think would create a more pressurized situation, is social media. I think social media would have really added pressure to me as an athlete. And I watch what the athletes are going through these days. They spend a lot of time on their phones. A lot of them make a lot of money in terms of trying to market themselves on their devices. So they have to spend a lot of time on their phone. But for me, you would have been able to look at what your competitors were doing. You would have been second guessing things. It would have blown my mind, I think, having probably would have used it the other way too, to show people that I was in ripper shape. Mind games of it. But Instagram is one of those things, and in lockdown especially, when you keep seeing everyone's perfect version of themselves, I think that is something that I would have had to, as an athlete, force myself to have time away from my phone, to get away from it, social media. I think that would have been quite a pressure cooker for me, the social media side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And that digital well-being and trying to take breaks. And actually, I've seen a lot of athletes who will get to championships and, take a complete break. And you can understand why, because I think that pressure is immense, like you said. And even working out little coping strategies beforehand. I love your coping strategies of like go for a walk with the dog. And, but you're also really great within, I'm lucky enough to be able to have trained with you and know that, you've brought in a lot of natural mental health skills and training, like naturally anyway, in terms of like self-talk cues or cues that took you away from like the burn or the pain, the lactic when we've done split whatever we were doing, split fives or whatever it was just anyway. I think that there is the digital space, and the social media space is one to really be focused on, of getting strategies of what am I going to do when it gets a bit more of a pressure cooker. And like you said, just having an awareness of it is really, really good. And also there are supports there. So if you do feel like you fall into a hole, you've got sports psychologists, there are psychologists available. The AIS have got a mental health referral network with professional psychologists who are on hand to be able to support you at, just after a phone call. So there's lots and lots of support out there for people. So and I think this is something you can get better at as well. So if the help is available if you need to, especially, within this uncertain time. I know Athletics Australia have really been trying to, provide as much certainty as you can at this time, because I think that's really important. But sometimes within that uncertainty, feelings come up and mental health does take a little bit of a wobble. And in those times, reach out, be it to a coach or to a family member or a friend. But, the supports are there, and to definitely reach out.
I think for me, when you are an elite athlete, your main drive and focus is that end goal of what you're trying to achieve in the sport. So everything else just falls in line that can fit in. So yeah, your social life takes a hit. But then on the flip side, you meet some amazing people and you have an incredible journey and you make connections with people you wouldn't have otherwise met. So your social life could also be better if you look at it that way as well. So for me, I balanced it pretty easily by just compartmentalizing things to what was the most important. You prioritize them, if you know what I mean. So for me, the priority was, at this stage of my life, I want to be an elite athlete, but I still want to be able to enjoy the journey, enjoy the process. And so I knew about life after athletics being important because my parents were both athletics, and so they had drummed that into me, that athletics was more of a hobby. You need to make sure that you are well balanced. And so I was very lucky that I had parents that taught me that early days. But having said that, I just made sure that the relationships that I had were important ones. I think I became, and I got it wrong, Mel. I so got this wrong. Like, there were things where I made mistakes in my life. And if I looked back, and I'm sure everybody who hits 40 would go, oh, if I went back, I'd do it so much better. But, you know, that's part of the learning experience. But I would say to you, as an elite athlete, the balance is so important. So you make the friendships and the connections you have really important ones, so that when you are spending time with them away from the track, it's quality time. You study, you become really good at balancing. You know, when you sit there and you're on the computer and you're on social media these days, imagine the time you waste. You just get really good at doing things when you say you're going to do them. And so my balance was probably right by being able to do the study and the work and train and compete. And I also got to see my friends. So I think it's about having that healthy balance right. And like I said before earlier in one of the other questions, that as long as you, for your elite athletics, as long as you eat well, you recover well, you sleep well, and you do that quality training well, then what you do in that spare time, as long as it's not affecting those 4 things, then by all means, a lot of the times they'll complement. You need to have time away from the track to survive, I think.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And it sounds like your balance changed throughout your career as well. So what it started at and what it finished off as, you were just listening to yourself to know what you needed at that time to change that balance.
And it correlated with the results. So when I got the balance right, my results were amazing. When I had the balance wrong, that's when my performances dropped.
So for athletes to really tune into that and to try and, you know, use support, speak to the coach, family and friends, and if you're needing a bit of help tweaking, you know, again, come to myself with study and career and stuff. That's great.
Yeah, they'll know. You've just got to ask the hard questions of yourself sometimes. It's like when you get to the end of the season and you have had a terrible time at a major, or you've had a terrible result, you just need to look in that mirror and ask yourself the tough questions, and you need to answer them. And sometimes you may need help by asking somebody else to say, look, this is what I think I'm doing right. What do you think? And you'll get to the point where you get the balance right.
But you're not going to get that growth unless you have that learning, though, are you? Unless you make those mistakes, you're not going to get to that end point to know what, you know, what building block you need to shift or to change.
Yeah, mistakes aren't bad. It's not learning from the mistakes that's bad.
Exactly.
Yeah. Stop athletics. So when I was in athletics, I was so like a horse with blinkers on. You know, I was in this tunnel, and the only thing that mattered in my tunnel world and tunnel vision was that end goal that I'd set myself, which was a ridiculously high achievement that would have been put on paper that I wanted to get, and anything less was considered a failure for me. So I was so in that tunnel through my whole athletics career. Even though I had good balance, I still had such tunnel vision towards my goal. I think when I've left the track, the main thing that I realized was that there's more to life. Not getting the result I want didn't actually end my world. There is a life outside of athletics. You know, I've had 2 kids. I've got a wonderful husband. I wake up, and even though it's taken me a long time to transition to a point where I enjoy it, there's a lot to enjoy about life after athletics. And so for me, the main thing that I've noticed would be just that perspective change. And having said that, though, I still feel like I don't want to lose the person who I was as an athlete. I feel like the skill set that I developed as an athlete is really valuable. And I've watched ex-athletes walk away from our sport and leave in a bitter frame of mind because of how things have gone. The last few years of my career were really disappointing. Things did not go the way that I wanted them to, and they really hurt. I like to think that I will always remember how hard it is being a track and field athlete, and I will always hold on to that respect that I have for each and every athlete that tries to achieve and be elite in our sport, because it's incredibly tough. And I also would like to make sure that I stay involved in the sport somehow, so that I can help anyone that I can to achieve in this sport, and to hopefully tick off some goals that they have in it, and to tell them that lots of us understand what they're doing is incredibly tough, and we are super impressed and respect them for what they are setting out to achieve. So even though I do have perspective having left, I still want to stay involved in the sport, because I really do understand how tough the sport is. And I think that if everybody walks away from our sport with a bitter frame of mind when things don't go right, we'll never change it. And it's really incredibly important to me that the communication improves for the athletes. The athletes feel like they are what the sport's about because they are, and that we really respect the performances that they put on the board, whether they're going to win an Olympic gold or whether that's the best performance they're ever going to do in their career. I truly love being involved in trying to change the sport back to being more about the athletes.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I love that answer in that, it is about the athletes. And like you said, it's that perspective, and time gives you perspective on your career of all the things that, you've sweated over and, lost sleep over.
Mm-hmm.
It's not to say that it's not important. It is. It's really, really important. But you need to see it in the whole concept of your life, and its holistic approach to it is really important. And like you said, there are other facets to you as a person. You're not just that athlete. And I don't know about you, that took me a little while to kind of work out, because it was so, you immerse yourself in it and it's hard to step away from it sometimes. But it's not that you want to step away. It's a really core, important part of you, but there are other really, really important parts of you that we can boost up. And, hopefully when you are at the twilight end of a career, you don't necessarily have to be bitter or feel that it's a bad thing. It can be a good resolution and a good point, an exciting point. I'm really excited about the opportunities that we have for people. And, there's recently the Lifeline community custodians were announced for 2020-21, and Dane, Katrina, and Louise are all, they're all community custodians for Lifeline, which is an amazing thing to have, not just for athletes and sharing their experience, but wider than that for the whole community. So but there's so many options to be able to give back, and those are just 3 people, an option that they are giving back from a community perspective, and hopefully they're gaining within that also. But there's lots of opportunities. So it's a very exciting space to be in.
Isn't it interesting how athletes always identify themselves as just being that athlete? I think adding to Steve's question is, when you remove yourself from the bubble of athletics, you realize you're more than just Mel Purkiss, the 400-meter runner. There's so many more layers to you, and the skill set that you acquire while you're doing elite athletics can really be utilized in your life outside of athletics.
So much, and it's the bedrock and the foundation. And I think there's so many times that I would have turned around and gone, oh well, I didn't get to the Olympics and I didn't achieve my goal of getting to the Olympics, so I failed in what I was trying to do all those years. And I don't think that now, because I can see all the building blocks and all the things that have made me the person that I am, and make the great decisions sometimes, in terms of perspective and the resilience and everything. That was all through my athletics career, and as well as the travel and the meeting amazing people, getting to meet you, getting to end up being here and doing this. But it's this is what I really, really love about this role, is to be able to find people's passions. And I think if you're passionate about something, and that's not just the athletics, it can be outside of it, and to be able to really see people thrive on and off the track and field, I think is really important. So
It's interesting listening to you say that, because I've bumped into a few ex-athletes, and it's amazing how, as an athlete, when you retire, if you don't achieve the pinnacle, the absolute pinnacle, which is hard to achieve a lot of times, they feel like they failed. They spent their life failing, and they focus on the failures. I think that transition phase from when you stop competing to accepting that you've stopped, the hardest bit is realizing that you didn't fail. You actually succeeded because you put yourself out there and had a go. If you went about it the right way, you were clean, you were a clean athlete, you did the hard work, you sacrificed things, you went without, in terms of you spent money on getting overseas. There's so many things that you would have done in your athletic career that you should be immensely proud of. It's trying to change that mindset of focusing on the feeling of failure to really applauding yourself for doing really well at the things that you did do really well at.
Exactly, and putting yourself on the line and trying your hardest and putting the effort in. And we can't necessarily control the outcomes of some of those things, of who goes to what championship, or the medals, how they're dished out. But yeah, it's about those real, that human connection, to like putting yourself out there, trying your best, putting your heart on the sleeve, and what will be. But yeah, that is the amazing thing, I think, that we get to do time and time again as athletes, but puts you on a really good course for the rest of your life.
I agree. Oh, that's a really good one.
That's a good one.
And it's tough. I think the number one thing I would say, go gently. Be really kind to yourself in transition. It is incredibly difficult. This is going to sound quite intense, but it kind of feels like you're grieving, because you feel like you've lost a huge part of yourself, and you have. And I guess there's not a lot set up in terms of track and field for when you leave the sport. You feel like you get chewed up and spat out a little bit. And then you try and work out what next, where do I go from here? But I think it took me a little while to accept, okay, there was no more athletics. I did it gently. I went back by going to my club and still running a little bit, because I didn't have an end point. Where I thought my end point was going to be at London Olympics didn't happen, and I really struggled. The transition phase for me was probably extra hard. I'm lucky that I had great support network around me, and that's one thing you have to rely on. If you are struggling, you rely on those people that you have around you. And don't be afraid to ask for help from them, because it's not easy. Once I started to come through to the other side, I started to realize that I didn't have the degree I wanted from uni. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a vet, but I chose a different path because I was good at athletics from a young age, and I really focused on my athletics. I did get a science degree, but what I did do, instead of regretting what I hadn't done, I started to realize what I had in my own toolkit. My husband used that word the other night when he was explaining, you've got your own toolkit, and you put things in it as you go, and you go back and you call on it. The skill set that we acquire as elite athletes is pretty impressive. You take that to an employer and you tell them that, you are brilliant under pressure. You thrive in situations where others would flounder. You are confident. You are a great team player, because even though you're an individual sport, you had to travel the world and room with people from other cultures and other countries. You had to fit into a team environment with people who are completely different to you and get along, and then go out and perform well. You have a great skill set. And once I started to realize that, I thought, okay, I do have a lot to offer that isn't just about running 2 laps of the track fast. I can offer people a lot more. I think as an athlete, you are so self-involved, and the hard part about transitioning is sometimes you can get caught up in self-pity, because it's what we often do as athletes when you're so in that little bubble. And I think that's a really unhealthy spiral, and that's the one where you need to take your checks. And you can do that as an athlete, because you check yourself all the time. That's what you do when you're running. You set goals and you acquire them, you target them, you look in the mirror, you ask the hard questions. So if you feel like you are spiraling out of control in self-pity, that's where you start to go back to the basics, where for me, like I said, I go for a walk with my dog, and you start to see a bit more perspective. But you do remember, I think the day where I sort of changed my outlook on my transition, when I realized that I needed to believe in my own self-worth. I had achieved quite a lot. Yeah, I didn't sit in a schoolroom or in my uni books the whole time through, or I didn't go through an office environment to work my way up to get the big dollars in a corporate sort of world. But I can do that now. There's a lot of things that I can do now. But what I have to do is, when I go for job interviews, or when I put myself out there, not to fear failure, because you're going to get knockbacks, and accept that it's not, don't look at it on you as failing. Just look at it, okay, it was an opportunity that I tried to take. Well done for putting yourself out there. Try again. And I think that believing in my self-worth, so that every time I put myself out there, if I believe that I have something to offer, somebody else will believe that I have something to offer. So I've had to learn to take the confidence that I had when I towed the line as an 800-meter runner into the rest of my life. And it took me a while to do it, But now I've realized that, hey, not a lot of people get to do what we do. Not a lot of people got to be an elite athlete and represent their country. And that is pretty darn cool. Once you realize that, you start to take that self-belief and confidence to the rest of your life. And it attracts, employers are attracted to that because they realize that what you can do for their team that they've set up is really, really, you become a really valuable person.
Absolutely. And like you said, you've got your toolkit, and it might not be standing on the start line of an 800 meters, but it's still that game face and backing yourself, and it might be going into an interview to bring your best self, and to ooze that, and to forget that that doubting Thomas that sits on your shoulder going, can I do this, can I not? It's pushing that aside and focusing on what that is, like that goal of that job or the interview, whatever that is. And I think that's really important. And like you said, having that support team around you and going gently in the step off of what the post athletics career might look like, but you'll find your way, and to explore it with confidence with your toolkit. And it's great advice, Tamsyn. Thank you.
Too easy. Just remember though that it does take time, and while you are still competing, work on those connections that you're making, because connections are everything. And you are in a position where you will meet a lot of people that the average person doesn't get to meet. So make the most of it. And then when you do retire and you do come through the other side, don't be afraid to call on the connections. There's so many people who did athletics in the past, or there's people who have watched athletics and will really respect what you've done.
Absolutely. Well, that was the end of our questions, and thank you so much. It's been a great opportunity to chat with you, and the questions and answers that you've given have been brilliant, and I'm sure all of the athletes across the country watching this are going to really appreciate hearing from you and knowing what's available right now. So thank you, Tamsyn, and keep tuned to the questions and answers series on the virtual stadium and across our social media. But thank you, and we'll catch up maybe on the track again soon.
Can I just say one thing quickly, Mel? To the athletes who are listening, because I do know you and I do know what a great big heart you have and how well you work in this area, I think that if they don't tap into the resources that you have to offer, they're crazy. Absolutely crazy. So I think that you're the best person for this job, and I think it's brilliant having you working for Athletics Australia. So I just wanted to make sure the athletes do definitely feel like that you're a familiar face and approach you and get the help that they need, because sometimes the one question you ask can be the difference.